Hey gang, I got an offer for you today from LinkedIn. As business to business marketers, your needs are unique. B2B buying cycles are long and your customers face incredibly complex decisions. Isn't it time you had a marketing platform built specifically for you? LinkedIn ads empower marketers with solutions for you and your customers. LinkedIn ads allow you to build the right relationships, drive results, and reach your customers in a respectful environment. On LinkedIn, you have direct access to build relationships with decision makers. Of the 875 million users on the network, 180 million are senior level executives. 10 million are C-level executives. You will also be able to drive results with targeting and measuring with their tools built specifically for B2B. And best of all, they work. Audiences exposed to brand messages on LinkedIn are 6 times more likely to convert. LinkedIn ads also rank #1 for security, community, and ad experience as part of the Business Insider's Digital Trust Study. Make B2B marketing everything it can be and get a $100 credit. It's a $100 credit on your next campaign. Go to linkedin.com/MPN to claim your credit. It's linkedin.com/MPN. Terms and conditions apply.
The beauty of entrepreneurship is there's no one way to do it. But the downside of entrepreneurship is there's no one way to do it, right?
Entrepreneurs Enigma is a podcast for the ups and downs of entrepreneurship. So the wins and the fails that we all face being entrepreneurs, how we learn from adversity. Every week I talk to a different entrepreneur with a story to tell. I'm Seth Goldstein. Come with me on the journey. This is Entrepreneurs Enigma. Let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of the Entrepreneurs Enigma podcast. I am here with Brian Fanzo, also known as Fanzo, also known as the crazy guy on Instagram, the guy with the cute kids, the guy who's figuring out NFTs live and in real time. Those who don't know Brian Fanzo should be ashamed because he is literally all over the internet. I mean, he's out there. I don't even know how I first discovered you.
Yeah, I don't
I
know.
think
I don't know where that was.
maybe Amy Schmauer, who's now Landino.
Possibly.
Maybe because I've discovered her through Twitch.
Yep, that's when so that's when her and I became friends. So yeah, probably was through Amy, because Amy and I,
Yeah.
yeah, we've known each other since I think 2012, 2013. So yeah,
I first interviewed Amy. I've interviewed her a few times. I interviewed her in 2015 for one of these. I don't remember what podcast. I don't remember what podcast I interviewed you for originally.
yeah, I was thinking about that earlier. I was trying to think of what podcast was the one that we interviewed for last, but yeah, who
This is
knows?
the social media. I mean, it might have been social media addicts.
That might have been.
It might have been that one 'cause that makes sense. But literally, I've done so many podcasts in 10 years. I just knew they all have sort of the same je ne sais quoi about them. The whole kind of, they're kind of all about that kind of stuff. This is the first one that actually broke out of the mold.
Nice.
Very good. So, Brian, you are the king of social, in my opinion. You're out there. You tell us a little about, you're a keynote speaker. You worked for the DoD for a while there. Let's give us the whole background.
Yeah. So I guess I consider myself a digital futurist now, for whatever that means. But yeah, I worked 9 years cybersecurity for the Department of Defense here in Washington, D.C. 3 trips to Iraq, 2 to Afghanistan. I did
Wow.
54 countries in 4 years, or 5 years, I guess, technically. I've been to 76 countries total now. Yeah, I did that for about 9 years, and then I kind of chased my dream job, which I considered was a technology evangelist, kind of modeled after Guy Kawasaki and what he was doing at Apple. Yeah, he was kind of like the one that I always, and now he became a friend. So it's kind of funny how that whole world works. But
Such a sweet guy.
yeah, really, and just a great, great dad, great human. And so I worked for a startup out of Phoenix, Arizona for 2 years, kind of in that role, and then that company got bought, and that was kind of my kick out the door into an entrepreneurship. And I've been full-time speaking for those last 7 years. Around like 60 events a year is the kind of like the goal target, depending on, lately with virtual in there, that's for sure the case. And I really focus on, like helping audiences see the harmony between technology and humanity. And so that's kind of where my focus has been. And in the last 2 months, I launched a new podcast called NFT 365, all focused. I've been talking blockchain, and this kind of emerging tech since 2015. but I kind of fell in love with NFTs and their role in this whole tech space in 2021. And so I launched a daily podcast now that I'm hosting, which like you, I think I have 5 podcasts that I've hosted myself over the years, but never did I think I was crazy enough to take on
Daily
a
is
daily
nuts. Oh,
podcast. Yeah, it's actually crazy. It's as overwhelming and as crazy as like it should be or sounds like it is, but we're 34 episodes in and 34 days straight. So far, so good.
it's really great. It shows your energy.
And I had kind of like that talk, to myself on like, I can sit here, and this was like as cyber is taking off, right? So this is like
Yeah.
2011, 2012. And I just was like, I either will do that, stay there forever, or I have to get out now. I knew that like
Mhm.
9.5 years, I had the highest civilian clearance you could get as far as cyber, I had a top secret with polygraph, clearance. And I just decided, against all recommendation from all advisors in my corner, to give up the clearance, give up the government, the cyberspace, and kind of go into like, hey, I must chase what my dream was. And I don't even think I really knew what that meant. But I'm very blessed. Like now, circling back, like actually one of my old bosses, actually the boss I had when I left the government, has hired me twice to speak now for government
Oh, that's awesome.
events. So, and we're still, still good friends. So it's an interesting journey because I was making ridiculously good money, and I had a team of 34 direct reports. We had a team of well over 400 people that were running these cybersecurity classes and implementations at every U.S. military base in the
Wow.
world. And so leaving that was definitely not like, if we had a contract kind of like migrate, and then I had got promoted, and I was like the combination of the two was kind of like, and I would say it's kind of like the theme of for me was I understand like my complacency, that where I might get complacent in certain roles and certain environments. And thankfully, each of those that have come up, I've kind of taken like the road less traveled per se. And it's
Yeah.
just because that's just kind of what works best for me.
And that's what works best for a lot of people that we find it in entrepreneurship is that being your own boss, the flexibility. I mean, you can go to your daughter's soccer game when you want because it's like, oh, it's at noon. Okay.
Right.
Few emails out saying, can we reschedule these things? And you're off to the races. You don't have to like beg, please, kick and scream to get off from work.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I will say, like, I mentioned, like, I mean, I loved my government gig, and then I worked for a startup, and I went in there as a trainer, I think was my job. And I had asked the CEO when I had started the startup, was like, hey, this is the job I want. Like I want this technology evangelist job. And I outlined it and had it all set up kind of like what Guy Kawasaki had done at Apple. And I just said, hey, I'll take this entry level job, and it was, I mean, almost, I mean, well, it was more than a 50% pay cut from what I was getting at the government.
Wow.
But I was like, if I prove my worth and the value I can provide, like I want this role. Like I want this role to be, I wanted a dotted line to the CMO and a dotted line to the CIO and report to the CEO. So like that was where I wanted to kind of sit in that like sweet spot. And I don't even think we made 3 months, and they came
Huh,
back to me and were like, yeah, you over delivered. You have that role. That role can be yours.
that's
Let's define
awesome.
it. And yeah, and I had it for almost it was 2 years and 10 days. And then the company had got bought. CenturyLink had come in to buy the data center, and they were like, "What in the world is an evangelist? How do you like have this role? Why don't you have KPIs or sales quotas? Like, what are you doing? And like, how does that work?" And that was actually my last day. Like that, they pretty much were like, "Yeah, we have no idea why that guy even has a job." And it was partially because it was a beautiful. I mean, I loved the job. I mean, the role and everything was great. And yeah, and then I left to be an entrepreneur. And I'll say like most of my career I've worked from home. All of my
Mhm.
career I've traveled 40 plus weeks a year.
Yeah.
And I would say like, for me as an entrepreneur, I do love that the flexibility without question, that being that I can go to the daughter's soccer game. But I had a little bit of that in those other roles, which was kind of fun because I had kind of like designed, because I was traveling so much. I was like, well, you're not paying me overtime, but I'm traveling on Sunday evening, coming back Saturday morning. Like, how does this work? And so I had worked out some really great like flexibility within my
Well,
companies.
that's
But
cool.
I think the part for me that kind of like was the attraction side of it was really like redesigning the work I do and like what, that value I provide. I didn't realize how hard that was going to be as an
Yeah.
entrepreneur, but that part of it has been really fun, because if you looked at my 7 years as an entrepreneur now, not one of those years has the like back to back has the same revenue or passive income streams, or like all 7 years are different. Like, so it's pretty crazy.
It's pretty crazy. So, going on that is what is to you is the scariest thing about being an entrepreneur versus being, in a corporate job?
The toll on your mental health, actually, I would take that, because you can have the highest high followed by an email that is like within like an hour that you're like, it just undercuts you, right? And I think like that like roller coaster of how do you handle that, right? And especially because we know, as entrepreneurs that like oftentimes if we're not the ones selling or marketing, then there's nothing coming in, right? Like we are like, in many cases that like, even as you build a team out, there's still, a lot of, especially like my businesses, like if I'm not on a stage or doing a virtual event, like there isn't like I haven't, like there's, of course there's some passive opportunities, but like that like roller coaster of mental health, like emotional stability. And also, like I'm very loud and passionate and optimistic, but I also, will suffer from imposter syndrome and question things. I think we often like believe those that like are on stages or not afraid to talk don't suffer from that, but I do as well. And I think, when you're going through that as an entrepreneur, if you get stuck doing it alone or you take everything like, embody it inside of you, it's going to break you. And especially, with the world around us today. So yeah, the mental health side of it is one that is definitely without question, I think the scariest part.
We're going to take a quick break, hear from our sponsors, and get right back to the show.
Hey there, it's Jason Falls. If your company or maybe one of your clients sells to marketers, you look for advertising channels that guarantee business marketers are paying attention, right? Let me introduce you to the Marketing Podcast Network. You're listening to it right now. It's a network of podcasts all about marketing. So 100% of MPN's audience are marketers. Reach them by advertising on the Marketing Podcast Network. Learn more and find our media kit at marketingpodcasts.net.
I think that's the first time in 45 episodes that someone's actually said mental health. Usually just say the roller coaster, the same roller coaster, I know where the next paycheck is. But you came up with that. Wow, that it's so true. Even if it doesn't get you, put you on a manic state, it still affects you mentally.
Yeah. And especially
If
because,
you don't, you're a robot.
and the beauty of entrepreneurship is there's no one way to do it. But the downside of entrepreneurship is there's no one way to do it, right? So like, you're making up a lot of it as you go. You're betting on yourself in almost every corner that you have to. And to do that requires that like confidence and the idea like I'm not a huge fan of like the you know failure is a necessary step to success. I'm more of like you have to have an approach to failure that is for you. And like for me, it was instilled by my dad. Like growing up, my dad was an entrepreneur, owned a candy peanut brittle company in Virginia Beach where we grew up. And my dad always said that like failure is going to happen, but you have to believe you'll never settle for failure. And like that was been my answer, right? Like I will be scared of failure plenty of times, and failure has hurt me and lasted a heck of a lot longer than I expected in cases. But I've never once gone to the place of like, oh, I'm gonna like this is my end state. Failure is where I'm going to stay. And so for me, that's kind of allowed a lot of like the rolling with the punches, changing my business models. And even global pandemic comes around. I took 44 phone calls in 2 weeks from public speakers that were part of a mastermind I was in. I was a member of it, but because of my background, the way I've always pivoted and always adjusted, there was 44 speakers that looked like entrepreneurs that felt like they lost everything. And they were all like, I don't know what to do. I mean, it was very devastating in our community. And I was like, hey, let's talk this out. And I took on all those calls, not because majority of them get paid more than I do to speak. They're a bigger name than I am as in the speaking space. But it was mostly because like, hey, I've had this like roll with the punches, be adapting, okay, if I lose this income, I'm gonna have to figure out a way to make up for it here. And so I think, like that has helped. But the mental health side is, and I'm very, for those that, follow me on any social, I'm very open about my ADHD. I'm very open about the mental health side. I think that helps for me. Like, that's like my way of coping. It's not for everyone. Like that transparency can be scary, but for me, the more I share publicly, the more I feel like it gives me freedom just to kind of be myself.
Absolutely. So, what is the most important thing you to carry with you all the time?
Ooh, most important thing to carry with me. I live on my iPhone. My iPhone is like my everything. I take a lot of photos. I create a lot of content. I pretty much create content all day long, every day, right? And I think, yeah, the phone, my iPhone is, and I'm one that, I do a lot of work on my phone. My daughter is also, all they have to do is give me a look and they'll say airplane, dad. And I'll be like, okay, airplane mode. And the phone goes into airplane mode and it's time for me to kind of shut that down. But yeah, the iPhone would be definitely the thing that I couldn't leave home without.
Now, what's the best thing about being an entrepreneur?
I would say the best thing I believe is that your connection to what you create is like the beauty, right? Like you are able to create and make an impact in any way that you want to, and that impact is based on your role, right? There are a lot of like I loved every job I've ever had, but there was a lot of times where I questioned like we did a lot of work in the government and a lot of like we were doing a lot of things, but like what was my impact on like the bottom line and on the executives and like how much was I changing my customers and how like when I was in Iraq the very first time, like I felt like that was the first time I'd ever felt like truly like I was making a difference. We were securing a drone network in Iraq for active duty Marines and Army that were there. And like hearing them come to me and being like you're helping us secure something that is protecting our troops. And it was like, wow, like that feeling of like seeing it and feeling it. And, just so much respect for those that are in the military, like that feeling of like connection to impact is what I feel exists as an entrepreneur as well.
Brian, I love asking this to someone who's as into social media as I am. Where is the best place for people to find you?
So I am everywhere and anywhere. Like literally, I when you hear people say like pick one social network and stick with it, I'm usually pro that. But because I want to be able to help my clients be everywhere, I'm on every single channel with the exact same handle, iSocialFans everywhere. So I always say like pick your favorite channel, whatever anyone's listening to, whatever is your favorite. Follow me on that channel, and I can guarantee I'm active. I'm creating content. Like I joked that I said that on a podcast 2 months ago. And someone challenged me like, you're not active on Pinterest. And I am. And so they sent me a message over on Pinterest and they're like, I did not expect that you would reply there. So, everywhere and anywhere. I mean, Twitter has been my first love. And I would say still is my favorite social channel of all of them. But yeah, I'm on all of them.
Brian, this has been fantastic. I'm glad to get you on one of the other iterations of my podcast.
Yes, I know. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome, buddy. And we'll see everyone next week.
Cheers.
That was a great show. Hey, if you're enjoying Entrepreneurs Enigma, please give us a review on the podcast directory of your choice. We're on all of them. And these reviews really help others find the show. Also, if you're getting value from the show and want to buy me a coffee, go to the show notes and click on the link to help me stay awake while I bring you more great episodes to your ears. That's in the show notes, and I look forward to the next episode. Take care, guys. Goldstein Media hopes you have enjoyed this episode.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Neville Hobson and Shell Holtz are the legendary hosts of FIR4, Immediate Release, a great podcast. Shell, tell us what these fine folks will get when they listen.
Well, Jason, Neville and I have been producing FIR since January of 2005. It's the very first PR communications podcast ever. We analyze current news and trends from a communication perspective with a short episode or two each week and a longer, more in-depth show every month.
Awesome. Where can people subscribe?
Well, they can go to firpodcastnetwork.com. They can find the show, of course, at marketingpodcast.net or search for Immediate Release wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard him, folks. Go subscribe. This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.